today as we continue our walk through Isaiah. Today we are covering Isaiah chapter 40 verses 18 through 31. We'll be talking about God renews. God renews. So as we get started, quick question. How do you compare people? Let's just compare two people that are at the top of their game. Who are the two best NBA players that you know all time? Who are the two best football players all time? I don't know. Let's just get wild and crazy. Who are the best wrestlers you've ever known? You know, as you think about it, as we compare people, and even like musicians that we compare, who's the best band that's out there? Who's your favorite band? And we can get some heated arguments over best football teams. But when it comes down to us comparing who God is to anything else in the universe, it should pale in comparison of how great God is. And so these comparisons that we talk about on an earthly level, whether it's our sports people, our sports teams, or musicians, your favorite president, your favorite pastor, whatever that is, when we have those are debates that we can carry on, and it's going to be up to your opinion. But when it comes to us comparing anything or anyone to God, there should be no comparison. So God alone is worthy of worship and trust, and the one who trusts in the Lord will not be disappointed. So as we're getting started, Isaiah chapter 40 through 41, Judah faces Babylonian exile. Or in the later part of Isaiah has already been told, hey, Babylon's coming, you're going to be exiled for the sins committed by Israel of not trusting in God. Isaiah encourages them to remember that who their God is, and that he is the only one that can deliver them from the hands of the Babylonians after captivity. So, as we dive in, Isaiah chapter 40, let's start at verse 18, go through verse 20, and as I read these two verses, identify who is accomplishing the actions described in these verses. Verse 18, with whom will you compare God? What likeness will you set up for comparison with him? An idol? Something that a smelter casts and a metal worker plates with gold and makes silver chains for? A poor person contributes wood for a pedestal that will not rot. He looks for a skilled craftsman to set up an idol that will not fall over. So as we read and as we look at these three verses, and you identify the actions described in these verses, what we find is that when we are trying to compare who God is, Isaiah kind of goes a little on the satire side of things, a little sarcastic, and says, go find your best smelters, get your best metal workers, make the gold, make the silver, get a poor person to find a pedestal and make sure that your idol doesn't fall over, make sure it's good and sturdy. And it says all these things are things that you make that can be flawed. And you got to get the best people to form and shape to make the image of your God. But when we compare in verse 18, when it says, with whom will you compare God? What likeness? There is nothing that we can do, nothing that we can create that is going to compare to who God is and how great and awesome our God is. Right? It's going to take many men of different skills to come in and try to make an idol. That idol may rot. That idol maybe melt down later when you get overthrown. The Assyrian guy would come and Sennacherib came in and would destroy all your idols, which meant that your God was weaker than his God. And even just with the whole pedestal, make sure it doesn't rot. Make sure it doesn't fall over. Even back in David's time, when the Ark of the Covenant went before Dagon, the Philistine god, and they captured it, and the Philistines put it in there, Dagon would fall over before the Ark of the Covenant, which meant that Israel's God was more powerful than the Philistines' God. So when he talks about idols falling over, it means they're falling over as they're inferior. Here it says you're trying to put and build a God that's greater than God, the creator of everything, and it's just not going to work. So the sarcasm there is you're going to try to make something better than the one who made you and made everything in this world. So when it talks about with whom shall we compare God, what likeness will you set up for the comparison with him? That likeness was the likeness that God put inside each and every one of us. So God lives in us. He created us in his likeness. How can we then turn around and create something in God's likeness? We can't do it. We're not the creator of the world. But it's foolish for us to continue to try to build things that won't last, to build things that are always going to be inferior to who God is. Why are people often more impressed by the work of human hands than all that God has done? And how does Isaiah reveal this as foolishness? And so as we're carrying on, just pause, think about that, jot down your answers, come back, hit play, and we'll carry on to our next section. As we move on, Isaiah chapter 40, verse 21 through 26, as I read these verses, listen for the relationship between the Creator and the creation. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been declared to you from the beginning? Have you not considered the foundations of the earth? God is enthroned above the circle of the earth. Its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like thin cloth and spreads them out like a tent to live in. He reduces princes to nothing and makes judges of the earth like a wasteland. They are barely planted, barely sown, their stem hardly taken root in the ground, when he blows on them and they wither, and a whirlwind carries them away like stubble. To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal? Asks the Holy One. Look up and see. Who created these? He brings out the stars by number. He calls all of them by name. Because of his great power and strength, not one of them is missing. So as we look in these verses, as we go down, God created everything in the midst of this. And according to his audience, and when he talks about how great of a creator that he is, he says, who can you compare me to? From the beginning, these are the things I've done. I created the foundations of the earth, right? Judges and princes rise. And when they rise, he goes, they barely are growing whenever they are just whiffed away. The heat comes and they dry and they die and go away. Why? Because God is sovereign and in control of all of that. Now, a little background on this. When it talks about the stars, right? In verse 26, look up and see who created these. He brings out the stars by number. He calls them by name. Because of his great power and strength, not one of them is missing. Now, Mesopotamia back then, in the Near East, they described gods that when one god defeated another god, he would take that god and then he would weave him into creation. He would take that dead god's corpse and he would craft the heavens and earth from that corpse. That's what Mesopotamian mythology taught. So that God, the overthrown gods were incorporated into creation, not more powerful than. This Isaiah comes back and says, you talk about your gods being incorporated into this world, and they're a part of this world. I'm here to tell you my God is above this world. He sits and looks over everything in this world that he has created, and he sits over all of it. There is nothing more than him. He has created everything. It is his footstool. It is below him. It is, he is so far removed from it. He's not even a part of this creation because he's the creator of everything that you see. He knows the stars by name, not incorporated into the stars. So most ancient people believed creation was made from the same divine substance as their God. As a result, the gods were tied to this world. They operated in and were affected by it, but not Israel's God. He was wholly apart from what he had made. Okay? So, in comparison, God, the seemingly huge impact of a human leader is a very small thing. Their idols were small in comparison to God. Their leaders, small in comparison to who God is. So, why might people be tempted to look to create things for strength and safety instead of the true creator God? Why is it that we always want to try to create things that are more powerful than us? I don't know. I think part of it is that we like to create gods in our image. Gods that with our desires. Gods that we want. So when we talk about making idols, we want something that reflects who we are. Even back then, even if it wasn't necessarily in that culture reflecting who they are, they wanted to trust in something that was more powerful than them. So I just find it that that's part of our sin nature, is we want to be in the midst of creating gods in our image, gods that we rely on and trust in, when we have the one true God that is there in front of us, and we should put all of our trust and hope in him. But our sin keeps coming back to saying we are better than God and we can make our own and do better. So how should we know that God is the creator and is directing the affairs of his creation how should knowing that God is the creator and is directing the affairs of his creation, how does that affect us in our daily life? How does it affect our daily life knowing that God is the creator and he is directing the affairs of his creation each and every day? Pause and think about that. Just pause the video, jot down some notes on your notepad. Just think, how is it that God being the creator of this world affects me each and every day? Think through some of those items, whether it's minute or whether it's big items that you think of. Just pause and think of it and say, Holy Spirit, reveal to me. Show me how you affect my life each and every day. When you're done with that, come back and we'll go to our next section. All right. While we are insignificantly compared to God, we find hope in knowing that we have been created by the same and mighty sovereign God who created the entire universe. So as I read this last section of verse 27 through 31, I want you to look for the change in tone in these verses. Okay? It goes from look at how great God is, and then the tone changes to an earthly tone. And that tone is us now trusting in the Creator. It goes from let me show you how big God is, let me tell you how big God is, and everything else is so small. But in the midst of that tone, what we see is that God desires to use each and every one of us. Okay? So let me read. Jacob, why do you say, and Israel, why do you assert, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my claim is ignored by my God? Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the whole earth. He never becomes faint or weary. There is no limit to his understanding. He gives strength to the faint, and he gives strength to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Youths may become faint and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary. They will walk and not faint. And I think when we look at these verses, what we see is that God is so removed from his creation. He is not a part of creation. Like he is not intermingled into this desk that I'm sitting behind. He is not in that tree over there, like kind of new age. He is so far removed because he created everything. He's distanced himself, but that's kind of what we call his transcendence. He is so powerful. He transcends above everything. But then we talk about his characteristics of he's immanent. He is so close and personal with us as well. And here it says, when you see the transcendence of God and how powerful he is, why would you ever want anything more? But also when you see how immanent he is and that he walks with us, he renews our strength personally. He's a personal God, not some distant God above the universe that created it and threw it out there and just said, good luck. No. Even when we run faint and when we stumble and fall, those that trust in this God, this strong, huge, magnificent God, he renews their strength. It's a personal touch. They will soar like wings of eagle. They will run and not grow weary, and they will walk and not faint. Why? Because the God that created everything cares about us individually as well. He walks with us, and that's why Abraham is called a friend of God, because he walks with us each and every step. He is not out there so high and mighty that he forgets about the little things. He's in control of all, even down to the details of our life. Okay? So, is it okay for us to complain to God? Is it okay for us to complain to God? And what can we do or say if we feel forgotten by God? I think God is big enough to handle any question and any doubt you have if you come at it with the right context. Like if you look at the Israelites that come out of Egypt, when they come out of Egypt, they're complaining and bickering, and God does not listen to them. But when Moses and David come before him and say, hey, my enemies are my foot, where are you at, God? They come at it from an understanding of, hey, Heavenly Father, where are you? I'm your son. I don't see it, but it's a trust of, God, I know that you're there. Versus the Israelites of, we want those gods versus you. David and Moses come from it and come from the attitude of, we know you're God. We know you're more powerful than all these other gods. We just need understanding. And I think when we come at it with that right attitude and we're crying out to God like the psalmists do, when we approach God with our fears, we should do so with an expectant and trusting heart, not a heart of abandonment of, well, this is one God and we can choose these gods, as Israel did. Moses and David said, this is the God, and we need understanding from this God. And we're crying out in a trustful plea to say, please help us understand our circumstances. So this tone shifts here. The incomparable attributes of God are presented as reason to hope and trust. What are those attributes? Everlasting God in verse 28. The creator of the whole earth, never becomes faint or weary. No limit to his understanding. That is who our God is. He is without getting tired. He has all the understanding that there is. He's the creator of everything. He is everlasting. And we are renewed when we trust in our Creator. So, as we wrap up today, I hope that you understand that God renews us personally. Even though He is so high and mighty and creates everything, His transcendence should show us that we should be trusting in Him more than anything else that we can create. And that when we run tired, when we grow weary, when we need rest, God is there to restore our soul personally as well. But, all right. So with that being said, let's conclude with that. And let me just close you out in prayer. And let's just thank God for being our creator and our sustainer as we move forward. All right. Dear God, I do thank you for today. I pray and ask, Father, that all things that we just marvel at your creation and how you created the world around us, how you created us, Father, and let us not neglect that. But Father, also let us know that you sustain us each and every day, moment by moment, and you renew our spirit, you restore our soul, and you you walk with us at all times. Let us be refreshed by that, and let us trust in you completely. In your name we pray. Amen.